I also realize that throughout history, we've been able to avoid some of the kind of traps that we're falling into right now, with not everybody coming to a cohesive understanding of Christianity. So we talked about this before, and I was like, so what is that thing that's going to really bind us together? What's the thing that's going to keep us, if I'm right, about kind of that mutually assured destruction thing? And if you're right, perhaps, about the idea of prosperity and what it has caused us to, how it has caused us to act, which is kind of what I heard you saying. And then maybe suffering is the only, or difficulty is the only answer to, or response to the prosperity in which we have enjoyed, which we know this as a cycle that's happened throughout history. That's happened in the Bible specifically. You see people rise up to a level of prosperity, they take prosperity for granted, and then they begin to turn their back on God, go do all sorts of things, start killing their own children, all sorts of stuff. And then suffering happens. God sends in, a Babylon or something like that. And so you see this cyclical nature, and maybe we're just in this cycle, and we're starting to see the cycle turn, and that's what's causing some of us to be like, whoa, hey, things are changing here. This isn't what it used to be. But we had this conversation, and you said something that I thought was fascinating. So what is that one thing that is going to help bring us back together from the polarizing sides and from the segregation of these little camps of ideology that we've created in our modern era?
What we were talking about earlier was humility. We were talking about this notion of humility, this notion that that we have to kind of come to the end of ourselves, and we have to say, yeah, I don't have anything else to give, and that's something that we don't live with at this point. Going back to this notion, or going back to the idea of postmodernity and metamodernity, we are the quintessential sort of picky eaters at the end of like a very prosperous family, right? And we are dissecting all of these different things, and we're saying, well, I want a little bit of this, I want a little bit of that, but we have no humility whatsoever. And that's why I was saying about sin and death. Sin and death will find us out, and when that happens, we have to step into a place of humility and go, yes, we're wrong. We're wrong. We recognize that we're wrong. And I don't know if we want to kind of take that full circle and you really talk about maybe not necessarily political response. What's the believing response, if we're talking about in the most humble terms that we can, without sort of feigning humility. Like what's the response that we feel like we should seek for understanding, like the Chauvin trial? Like, I don't know, what's your thought on that?
In terms of what we should, what humility looks like looking at that trial? The lens of humility? Yeah, I think it says, I don't know, I want to be careful with this, because I think it says what I said, which would be the opposite of humility. No, I think it says, we need to be honest about this. We need to be willing to have a conversation about it, but we also need to be willing to be sympathetic. But we also have to understand the limits of sympathy. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the one thing that I've just really been toying around with right now, is that if we're going to continue to fight with each other, sympathy becomes all that more important. But we also have to understand the limits of sympathy and the power of truth. So I think humility would understand sympathy, but it would understand truth as well, and it would speak the truth with sympathy. So the Bible way of saying that would be speak the truth in love.
Something that kind of was brought to mind immediately when you were saying that is that I was listening to a cultural commentator talking about this idea that in our culture specifically, we've moved to a posture of being overly empathetic and under compassionate. And I think that's the case, and I think that actually consensus in the United States and the Western world, and when we're talking about in broader terms, is driven by the concept of empathy, right? And empathy is like it's a thing that's taught in schools, it's a thing that's relayed through all of our conversations, and we're trying to over empathize, but at the same time, we seek not to bring compassion into that conversation as well, right? And that's kind of a frightening thing, because for us as Christians, are we sharing our faith? Are we sharing the things that we feel like are important in a compassionate way, because we believe that these are keys to unlocking a broader understanding, to connecting with Christ, to understanding your own salvation? Are we bringing compassion, or are we shying away from that and just kind of becoming overly empathetic people? And I'm just going to put myself in that situation, and I'm going to sort of vote with my own empathy, right? Because I want to be a part of what the broader group is saying at this point. I think that's kind of a scary thing as well.
Catch new episodes of Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman for free right now by going to YouTube or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Simply type Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman in the search bar and click on my face. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to stay informed when a new episode drops.